Good day, guys. Happy vernal equinox. And this is a video it's been in the works for a little bit. The photographs I've taken aren't the best quality. My phone doesn't work so well after the 2.0 zoom. Usually it gets good images, but today it wasn't getting the best, so we'll make do with what we have. You can definitely see what's on here. So I've been reading this book, Insects and Their Ways and Means of Living. And this video particularly focuses on termites and aphids as pertain or as written by Robert Snodgrass here, who has some interesting things to say. And this video was prompted by this paragraph at the bottom of page 156 in relation to aphids. To lead into that, we will see. Moreover, the story is not yet complete, for it must be added that all the generations of the aphids, except one in each series, are composed entirely of females, capable in themselves of reproduction. Now, this brings to mind when I was younger and lived in Hawaii for a while, and I came to realize how rare males were. They were the male mosquitoes, that is. They were multivariate colors, blues, oranges, things of that nature. And then the females were black, and you'd see them everywhere, and those are the ones that were sucking the blood. And it's very common in for insects to subsist on mostly female populations, and that's what we've found in our population here on Earth as well. Biologically female populations are the most biologically female people are the most common on Earth by far in a long shot. So in warm climates, it appears the female succession may be uninterrupted. So listen to this. How insects do upset our generalizations and our peace of mind. We have heard of feminist reformers who would abolish men. With patient scorn, we have listened to their predictions of millennium where males will be unknown and unneeded. Feels like right now, and here the insects show us not only that the thing is possible, but that it is practicable, at least for a certain length of time. And that the time can be indefinitely extended under favorable conditions. So you have men that are being chemically castrated or hormonally castrated in the womb, and then they come out as swires. And then you also have the free martin and the regular females, and they've made it so there's no need for the males. Free martins can reproduce this this male penis, hyena penis, if you will. It works, it functions, the female penis, and it can produce offspring. So they have sustained this, and I think Snodgrass is acknowledging that here with the aphids as well. So here is the male form of the aphid on the left with the wings, and the female on the right, the wingless sexual female. When they aren't sexual, they do have wings, and it's in similar and high relation here to the aphids is the termites. And as you can see, the A and B winged forms of the male and female, and then you go down to the soldier class, which has the large pincers on the mouth for defense and also for burrowing, but predominantly the burrowing is done by the workers, and they're the ones that maintain the majority of the hive, if you will. But it's more like a different kind of system to a hive, and the main portion, the hive that we know being queen, that many people know being the bees. If you look at termites, the male, actually the king, stays alive and stays with the queen, and in the deepest recesses of the hive, as it were. Um, so yeah, that foundation's interesting. It's different than what you see with bees, where they have a queen bee, and you have the king, or you don't even have a king. You have different workers that inseminate her, and then but so this is talking about the king, but if he too should be lost, and the workers give succession to one or more pairs of the second or third caste reproductive forms to whom they grant their royal prerogatives, the progeny of any of the fertile castes will include the castes of the parents and all castes below them. In other words, only winged forms can produce the whole series of castes. So that's the idea. Is in this termites world, you're born into your caste because of the form you have, and we are too. We don't know that, but when only A and B can produce the vast array here, um, they are they are going to be treated differently than the rest because they can produce all the forms needed to form a functioning colony, an effective colony, if you will. So then what's interesting too to note is that it takes a few broods of the winged to produce winged cast members once again. That is very curious. So it appears, therefore, that each imperfect fertile insect lacks something in its constitution that is necessary for the production of a complete termite individual. The production of a constitutionally different caste from the eggs of a single pair of parents. So, yeah, you have the usual king and queen, or wing reproductive class, having lost the wings once they've performed their duties, and then they go into the recesses of the hive and still reproduce. And but most of the work is the bulk of their work is being done is by their offspring, and then so forth. And then the third generation goes out and has this flutter period, as we'll get into. So again, here's the third form or wingless reproductive caste of the queen. Let's see. And then, so then what's interesting too is, let's see. It may be observed that there is a suture across the base of each wing just to make the breaking easy. Comes against the weak bases. Once they've found a new colony, this happens. Now, wingless termites, being young males and females just come to maturity, naturally pair off. Okay, so then here's the section I wanted to get into. So it appears then that termites commonly have a complex society of castes, where we must now add worker and soldier caste to the two castes of potentially reproductive individuals, and the royal or actual productive caste consisting of king and the queen. We are introduced to a social state quite different from anything known in our own civilization, for though we may have castes, the distinctions between them are largely of polite concession. No, they are not. We don't even have a say. I suppose there is polite concession in that we're not going out trying to harm these, royals, if you will. But we don't adhere. We don't. I do not adhere to any of these quote unquote royals that are out there. The only royal is Jesus Christ, the God in the flesh, the Son aspect of the Trinity. And going forward, we theoretically can't claim that we are all equal, though we know that this is but a gratifying illusion. Our inequalities at least do not go on by recognized caste. A termite, however, as I said before, is literally born into its place in society and eventually has his caste insignia indelibly stamped in the structure of his body. So this reminds me of the Brave New World, the Free Martin class. It's indelibly stamped into their body. They can still be great individuals, wonderful community members, and have all the gifts of God as pertains to casting out demons and living in the Ten Commandments. But they're indelibly born into a caste. They are biologically female. And then vice versa, you have, again, they have the reproductive organs of the female, but they have the male bodies. So it's for the swires. And yeah, it's a curious situation that we find ourselves in with all these females running amok. We theoretically claim that we are all born equal, though we know that this is blah blah blah. Sorry. So the state of affairs upsets all ideas and doctrines of the fundamental naturalness and rightness of democracy, and it is true that nature not only recognizes castes but creates them. We must look more closely into the affairs of the termite society to see how such things may come about. And if you look at this termite society and then look at those forms and then mask it on our own, if we have a society that's filled with soldiers and they know what they are, and then we have winged ones that don't even know what they are, then it becomes extremely confusing, and their method of control is through money and their Masonic system, of course. They don't have such a thing in termite society, as far as I know. So now, talking about the swarm, there's a swarm of winged males and females that issue after the third generation, or as the third generation, like from the king and queen onward, that brood. So the birds will feed on them, for the termites' powers of flight are feeble at best, but some of them will disperse, and then that horde will start anew. So they'll have the winged ones from that horde will start anew somewhere else, and then 3 generations on, you'll have another uh, winged It's the third year, I should say, not the third generation, the third year, uh, and you have the next generation of winged ones, which can then expand and spread all the forms of termites about um, in that cycle of 3 years. So the object, the winds have scattered them, and in a short time the fluttering horde will be dispersed, and probably most of its members will be destroyed. The objects of the swarming, however, is the distribution of the insects, and if a few survive, that is all that will be necessary for the continuance of the race. Okay. And let's see. So then what's interesting here, termites take vows. So like I was talking about for the king and the queen. The termites take vows of lifetime fidelity or till death do us part. So they're not like crocodiles or, many reptiles where they'll breed with many and whoever is available. They're more like humans and mammals that have lifetime partners. For with their female termite, intensive domesticity and maternity are the ruling passions. To find a home site and there found a colony is her consuming ambition. And whether the male likes it or not, he must accept her conditions. The female, therefore, searches out a hole or... That's what it feels like when I was moving around and doing things around my life is with my partner. I had to do a lot of the physical work, and then once we got there, everything was to her standard, and it still is to this day. But what's interesting about termites here is the female actually does the majority of the work in setting up the new homestead. Female therefore searches out a hole, and then it goes on to say she digs herself and makes the hallow from which they make their home. I thought this was interesting in that the only reason termites can process the wood that they do is they have intestinal protozoa. If they thrive on a wood pulp diet, and by December following the spring in which the young were hatched, the members of the new generation begin to attain maturity, having progressed through a series of moltings. The individuals take on replicas of their parents, having taken on the form of workers and soldiers. So it does take a while for these winged forms to form again. It's really peculiar how that works. But could humanity operate in such a way? Well, yes, if you have the winged forms, as I mentioned before, or the humans that are biologically male and female that can produce all the forms, you could have children that are intersex, and then that's all you have. They can still reproduce, but then the free martins cannot make a male. So a lot of this can happen very naturally. It isn't uh, necessarily being set into place by satanic powers, but yes, of course, much of it is. So it's just up to you to determine on the individual what their constitution is based on your workings and your interactions with them. But this happens naturally, it seems. As you can see through the insects, it's a clear parallel to what we see. But other than there seems to have been, as we've mentioned before, and many have alluded to, this sort of Victorian era, this era where maybe all the winged caste or the male and female humans, the standard ones, were wiped out by the eunuchs or the soldier type form, which is equally as important, but they banded together. There were more of them, so forth. Or simply, what was more likely is that it was a concerted effort by them, and secrets at the castle. So moving forward, talking about the succeeding molts. Say another year rolls by, bringing more eggs, more workers and soldiers, and now perhaps other forms after that third year. Marked a stage of development by the possession of short wing stubs or pads on the back of normally wing-bearing segments. With succeeding molts, the wing pads become larger and larger. So they molt and molt and molt until their wing pads become large, until they finally develop into wings, like those of the king and queen when they first flew out from the parent colony. At last, then, the new family is to have its first swarm, and when the fully winged members are all ready for an event and the proper kind of day arrives, the workers open a few exits from the galleries, and the winged ones are off. We already know their history and do what their parents did before them and what their ancestors have done for millions of generations. And then many who develop the wing pads don't have their wings grow to functional size, and thereby are prevented from joining the swarm. So this is, I think, the equivalent here would be like a swire. So they don't have they have the prepubescent boy body that's been dubbed down by hormones and such, and nothing grows to its full functional size because they're essentially Peter Panned or kept to a childlike state their whole lives. Not that these are, but it's reminiscent of that where their wings don't fully form. They don't go through natural puberty. So then this part, let's see. During the second year, great number of eggs with the inheritance of activity of her ovaries, her abdomen enlarges. Talking about the queen, and she takes on a matronly appearance, attaining a length fully twice that of her virgin figure and a girth in proportion. The king also, it's funny here, remains faithful to his spouse, and he too may fatten up a little, sufficiently to give him some distinction amongst his multiplying subjects. The termite king is truly a king in the modern way, for he has renounced all authority and responsibility and leads a carefree life, observing only the decorums of polite society and adhering to the traditions of a gentleman. He's the great dad of this whole colony, so he's given off to rest, I suppose. But that's, I don't know, I think that's kind of silly. It reminds me of the male line to some extent. But he also achieves the highest distinction of a democracy, for he is literally the father of his country. Another year rolls by, bringing more eggs, more workers and soldiers, and now perhaps other forms. So, really interesting how these termites work, and I gotta wonder if there's a similar mechanism in place for humans. It makes perfect sense that you cannot have a free martin that makes a male, or even a swire. Like it's so locked to the XX chromosome that you have it lets the common pairing off of a free martin and a female. It just won't. They won't be able to do it, and then you have the society going on and on and on. And I think that's what we have is we have either free martin swire or free martin women relationships that have gone on and on and on, and then occasionally a real man's born in the mix and mixes with a woman, and then there's like a few families that stand out, but that are like, I don't want to say what God intended, but it's you need all four types, right? And they shouldn't be doing any of the hormone, Boston Tea Party stuff behind closed doors. So take all that out and keep these four forms, and you have a totally different society. And I'm not saying that the men and the females as they are supposed to be given royalty by any means. Clearly, in our world, it's the polar opposite, where the most obvious trans-featured people are given royalty or high positions. You just expect this level of decency and um, commonality and a underlying feeling of connectivity without secret clubs of any sort. So it's really interesting to look at insects, and especially these termites and aphids, and how in many ways their societies reflect our own, with predominantly female members and female biology present, and how life can go on like that. Life finds a way. So this is an introductory study into insects. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I look forward to making more bug related content.